Sometimes the world doesn't speak in whispers. Sometimes it roars, in trade disputes, in rising bills, in the thunder of war, and even in the way we watch television. Tonight, I bring you 4 stories that don't just headline the news, they touch the very fabric of our lives. United States has slammed heavy tariffs, 50% on Indian exports, textiles, electronics, even oil shipments. For Washington, this is about protecting domestic industries. For New Delhi, it feels like betrayal from a so-called partner. This is not just about dollars and cents. It's about pride. It's about power. And it's about who controls the arteries of global trade. When 2 of the world's largest democracies clash, the shockwaves do not stop at their borders. Prices at your local supermarket, supply chains from factories in Asia, alliances that took decades to build, suddenly, all are fragile. And here's the truth most won't say out loud, in this fight, there may be no winner. Because tariffs don't just punish nations, they punish people. An Indian farmer growing cotton, an American family shopping for school clothes, both will feel the sting. The real question isn't who blinks first. It's whether both sides realize or that in trade wars, a victory is just another word for loss.
We put secondary tariffs on the Indians for buying Russian oil, and I could see if things don't go well, then sanctions or secondary tariffs could go up.
What about China? They're the main purchasers of Russian crude.
Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the president, but the president is the best at creating leverage for himself, and he will make it clear to President Putin that all options are on the table.
Well, let's get more on this now and speak to former Indian permanent representative to the World Trade Organization, Anjali Prasad. I'm glad to have you join me now. So let me start it this way. Prime Minister Modi promised to protect Indian small businesses and farmers, but what exactly can New Delhi do to withstand the American pressure?
Yeah, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
The Prime Minister and the Government of India are taking the right stand by not getting arm twisted by the United States. We have enough resilience, and our existing businesses, to my mind, would not be entirely export dependent. We have a very large domestic market, which will help them weather the storm in the interim till we find alternate markets, because we have a number of free trade agreements with a large number of countries, and I am sure we will be able to diversify our trade that is headed to the United States to these markets.
All right, now it would take years, if ever, to determine who benefits or who loses from the tariff wars. But how will Washington be impacted by this trade war with India? Will there be any repercussions?
Look, I'm sure there will be, because after all, if there are importers on the other side, then they are finding it useful and economically profitable to buy Indian goods at the prevailing base rates of tariff. Now that those base rates have been added upon, I'm sure the domestic manufacturers will also feel the heat. So will the consumers, because pharmaceuticals will directly affect the consumers. And that is the we have with the US, 0.01% and plus 25, so that is a huge rise. So the internal dynamics of the US economy will not allow this to be sustained over a very long period of time, is my reading.
Now, Washington is imposing secondary tariffs on New Delhi for its energy trade with Russia. Yet it doesn't seem to be in a hurry to follow suit with China. So what do you think is behind this approach?
You see, China has taken a tough stand against the US on their investments and other economic areas. And that is why they are giving it a little more time. But we have not yet taken any retaliatory action. So my reading is that China has been tough already with the US on their investments and other areas.
Now, following the meeting between Chinese and Indian foreign ministers, there have been reports that Beijing would address India's needs for rare earths. Now, are Washington's actions pushing the two countries closer to each other?
It would be a little early to say this. We will have to wait and watch. China is a very difficult interlocutor. We have issues with them on more than one front, and we have to wait and watch how far the Chinese go in addressing India's needs.
Right, the White House says that the tariffs are meant to cripple Russia's frontline efforts by tanking its oil revenues. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues trading crucial metals and fertilizers with Moscow. Such double standards raise questions, don't they?
Absolutely. It is hypocritical. And certainly Russia is not dependent only on Indian purchases, is it? So, and India is not busy fueling its war efforts. India and the US is buying far more high-value products from Russia even now. So these are double standards. It is hypocritical. It cannot stand the scrutiny of a WTO dispute if we were to go into dispute, because they are using the security exceptions clause. But how can they use the security exceptions clause discriminately?
That's a big question. Now, a U.S. trade deal, one that was in the making when Prime Minister Modi last visited the White House.
Now, at the moment, there is a pause in the trade deal discussions. My personal view is that we should walk away from this deal. This is one leverage we have against Washington. We should walk away. We should, because they have already preempted the deal. They have raised tariffs. So what deal are we talking about? It cannot be a one-sided deal, can it? So we should India should walk away from the deal is one major leverage we have against Washington.
All right. Now, we see India, China, and Russia engaging in diplomacy, especially now with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, which both Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi will attend. How valuable is this growing collaboration and at the highest levels?
We are already members of the BRICS. So both Russia and China, India, only Brazil and South Africa are out of this and some other countries. But we are already cooperating in that forum, and this will make it stronger between these three nations. And I think we do need to have a good relationship amongst the three.
All right, we have to leave you here now. Anjali Prasad, former Indian envoy to the World Trade Organization, thank you so much for your insight.
India is going to become a very, very successful economy. When that happens, and as that happens, the United States will not, like India, any more than the United States likes China right now. This is fated.
So we are at the moment, we are the underdogs at the moment, which is why we are getting all the love.
It's not so much love, unfortunately, believe me. And the point is, will not open the doors for Indian manufacturing. Even if India were to open the doors for agriculture, because Trump's whole idea is low-cost industry should not destroy American industry. So Trump is not going to do India wants, which is to make India the replacement for China. It's not going to happen, I think. Again, I'm not on the inside, and I don't want to in any way mess up the...
So then how is the United States using India? Because one would think that they would want to move their supply chains to India from China, which is why we are of interest to the United States for our population.
Donald Trump doesn't want supply chains. He really believes... He's a very unsophisticated person, by the way.
Okay.
So he really believes that America should produce what America produces. He doesn't want India's supply chains.
But America doesn't produce anything anymore.
Oh, but that's what he says.
Except defense.
So he wants all those jobs to come back. He doesn't understand the world economy doesn't work that way.
If you go back a few weeks, maybe call it 2 months, there were very positive signals coming out of both Washington, D.C. and New Delhi that a meaningful trade deal was imminent, and it's all fallen apart. And not only is there no deal, India is now paying some of the highest tariffs of any country selling to the United States. Right now it's about 50%, and Trump has said it's probably going to go up based on how relations with the Russians degrade. The Indians are saying this isn't fair because lots of countries trade with the Russians, and so why should India be the only country who's paying a penalty? And I'm not saying that there's nothing to that point, but it kind of misses the point of how this works and where it's leading. The United States and India right now, as well as a number of other countries that include China and Turkey and Russia, have rightist populist governments that focus on what makes their country special versus everyone else. These are not the sort of governments that normally get along. Normally, these are the type of countries that find themselves duking it out on the battlefield with one another. The reason that hasn't happened is because we've been in this weird moment in the post-Cold War environment where the old consensus has basically prevented it from happening. One of the things that right-wing governments, right-wing populist governments hate is the idea of a transnational group of liberals who impose some sort of policy on things. And, maybe there is something to that, but keep in mind what that means. If you have a multiple of countries that include, but are not limited to, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, the United States, Canada, Britain, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, and on and on and on, that broadly agree on the rules of the game and things like individual liberty and things like international cooperation and things like economic integration, then there's no reason for them to have an antagonist military approach to one another. There's too many other things in the system that stabilize the relationship. But if you have countries that don't see things that way, that focus on what makes countries different and unique as opposed to on the same side, then you don't have those arresting factors and you can get more conflict, not necessarily of the military form, but of any kind of form. And those are exactly the types of governments we have rising in the world today. In the United States, we have Trump. In India, we have Modi. In Turkey, we have a guy by the name of Erdogan who's been dragging the country this direction for 25 years. In Japan, we are seeing a cracking of the post-World War II consensus around centrist politics. In China, we've got Chairman Xi, who's now basically a tin pot dictator of a second world country. In Canada, we've had a bit of a hiccup where it looked like the government was going to go a different way in the last elections. In polls right now, in Britain and in Italy and in France and in Germany, the hard right is the more popular than it has ever been before. And of course, the Russians have been run by nationalists for quite some time. What this means is that consensus around liberal international values is breaking down in a way that we have not seen since the days before World War II. And if you you go back and look at your history, especially for the first half of this century, in the period before World War I and World War II, we had a lot of governments that kind of fit the mold that we're moving towards right now. Now, does that mean that we are doomed to have another major international conflagration on the scale of the World War? No. Different world. A couple big things to keep in mind. Number one, there are no countries, with the exception of the United States right now, that could fight in more than one theater. But if you don't have things like trade and integration tying countries together, then it is really easy for small flaps to turn into big ones. What happened with India in particular is both Trump and Modi assumed that because the United States and India were so special, that any deal would be done their way. And that's just not how it works. Also, India has never really had a free trade agreement with anyone, so anyone who thought that a deal was imminent really hadn't been paying attention to modern Indian economic structure or history. Where does this take us right now? Well, India has to figure a few things out. During the Cold War, they were neutral but broadly pro-Soviet. In fact, they were pro-Soviet even when the Soviets went away. And India now is a country that has agency and capacity. They're a major refinery center. They are a major stop on the path of all merchandise trade and energy trade between the Middle East and East Asia and between East Asia and Europe. They have a military that is capable for their needs. It can easily interrupt those flows. And they have an economy that is increasingly wealthier and increasingly diversified and increasingly technologically capable. What they don't have is projection power, either economically or strategically. Their military is designed for the problems that they have. It's designed for Pakistan. It's designed for Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. It can't project to the Middle East. It can't project to East Asia. It is a unit to itself. That defines how the Indians see themselves. They don't see themselves as part of any coalition. They see themselves as their own thing. And if you put someone from the populist right in charge of that, if you accentuate that mindset, then the potential for arguments with everyone become very, very real. So India is one of those countries that matters, but it matters which side it doesn't fall on because it empowers whoever's opposite. In the environment that we're in today, we're in this weird little situation where the country that the Indians are most dependent upon is China, which obviously makes Indian politics a little colorful these days. The Indians were thinking that their moment had arrived, that they had become strategically special and could have a leg in the American coalition without actually having to do anything. That was never going to fly. But the Indians also, wherever they do put their foot, are going to matter one way or another. So the debate right now is whether or not they should buddy up with the Russians again. If they do, they're bearing almost all the risk. The Russians would get almost all of the reward. But this is what happens when you have a rightist government that sees themselves as special in a way that maybe doesn't necessarily jive with strategic reality. Modi is learning that. Trump is learning that. And in time, pretty much all of governments like this will learn it. And when that happens, decision-making becomes a lot more hostile because no longer are they rebelling against the existing order. They're looking to build their own. And when that happens, we start getting new strategic relationships and hostilities, and that can boil up into something a lot more substantial.
We've gone from a US-China trade war to effectively a US-India trade war. What does that tell you?
From the Indian perspective, they're seeing shifts in U.S. policy and from President Trump that really differ from the broad bipartisan trajectory they've seen, even in President Trump's own first term. The President of the United States is threatening to impose very substantial sanctions now on India because of its relationship with Russia. The Indian government views that as both hypocritical because the transatlantic West continues to trade with Russia in other commodities besides oil, but also as a kind of blame shifting where the collective failure of the West to stop Putin's war is now being blamed on India. For its part, India also continues to be troubled by the American outreach, particularly by President Trump, to China in ways that India thinks over the long term may not be in its interest. I think that's the challenge, is that some of the strategic understandings that enabled the relationship are beginning to fall by the wayside.
Are we looking at the beginnings of what could be see a backlash in India against the US? And are there implications here for US businesses, everything from Nike trainers to iPhones and more recently Teslas?
I do think American companies are worried that they're going to be in the crosshairs because there are no winners in a trade war. And as this thing begins to spiral downward, you mentioned defense as an example. Industries, sectors, and U.S. firms that have led the way may find themselves being punished, and also their sectors and their possible contracts being politicized in ways that they would not have expected a few years ago.
In Britain, the colder shadow is falling not from the clouds but from energy bills. A rise of £35 a year. On paper, it may seem small, but for a mother in Manchester deciding between heating and food, it is not numbers, it is survival. Let's be honest. Inflation has already beaten. Wages stretch thin. And now, as energy giants count profits in the billions, ordinary families count coins for the meter. The story here is not about markets. It is about dignity. Should a nation of innovation, of industry, of history, force its people to choose between warmth and hunger? This is not just an energy crisis. It is a crisis of fairness, of trust, and perhaps of leadership.
The energy price cap, so prices will rise by 2% from October to December, so the final quarter of the year. They do these price reviews quarterly now, every 3 months, so that is an increase. Currently, an average household, a typical household, gas and electricity is paying £1,720 a year for its energy, according to Ofgem, which is the regulator. This latest cap increases the maximum, this is that suppliers can charge. This isn't the maximum you'll pay because it depends on how much you use, but to £1,755. So if you are a typical household, and who knows if anyone actually is, you're paying about £35 more. It's not very much. It is an increase. It's obviously, as we go into a quarter of the year, when people start, the heating's been off, hasn't it, the last 3 months? If you do look at your smart meter, if you've got one, it's been nice, hasn't it? Because you've only been using power for the cold drinks in the fridge. But it's the time when we turn the heating on again, and prices will rise marginally. They went down 8% in the second quarter of the year, so in the spring, so we're still net down on that, but it is an increase. And the increase, as far as it goes, part of it is government policy, the Warm Homes Discount, which is £150 paid to people struggling with their energy bills. It's part of the way of making up for removing the universal payment to pensioners for winter fuel, which was removed and then reinstated. So, but that cost of that payment to people who are struggling falls on all of us as bill payers. The biggest driver is wholesale gas prices. They've been broadly level but volatile over the last 3 months when they assessed the price. Donald Trump, the impact of his trade policies on global demand, that pushed prices down a bit. We saw the attacks by Israel and Iran, which pushed up prices because of concern about liquid natural gas. So we're broadly level, but it is a small increase, which is obviously unwelcome.
Exactly. Now have the highest electricity prices in the world. Okay, the developed world or whatever. And, you know, that means we have electricity that is 4 or 5 times more expensive for Brits than Americans. Mm-hmm. Electricity is an absolutely vital part of many businesses, not just steel makers with electric arc furnaces and that kind of thing, but AI. You know, data centers have to use electricity, etc. So it is lethally economically suicidal to have pushed electricity prices up to the degree that we have. And there is an attempt going on by the government and its chums in the crony capitalist unreliables industry to pretend that this is nothing to do with lovely cheap renewables. They've been saying that renewables are cheap for so long that they think it's true, but it's not.
So the energy price cap's going up again, but not in this house because we fixed our energy. So the price cap's rising in October, about 2%, as reported by the BBC at the minute. So most households will pay more again this winter. But here's what we did in our house. So we locked in our energy rate, so we get no nasty surprises. We bundled everything else like broadband, mobile and home insurance, all under a single supplier, which makes energy even cheaper. And thanks to our cashback card, we save about another £25 a month. just for doing our normal food shop and buying our petrol, etc. Most people don't realise they can do this too. They stay stuck on an overpriced tariff, waiting for the next price rise to hit. And it doesn't need to be that way. So we also even get free energy days. When you're ready, you can get paid to help other people save too. So if you want, drop me a message, no pressure, just for info might be the best 5 minutes of your month.
Gas and electricity bills are going up yet again. No surprises there. Ofgem has raised the price by 2% because clearly we are all lounging around in surplus. 2%. Not much, unless you're choosing between food, fuel and mental health. But let's all thank the regulator for limiting how badly we're being shafted. It's not extortion, it's regulated extortion. How civilized. And don't worry, there is help available. Just pop on to a comparison site, switch to another supplier, and get the same damn price just in a different font. Meanwhile, the energy companies are posting profits big enough to power the moon. But sure, let's just tell our pensioners to put a jumper on. That'll fix it.
In the east of Europe, the drumbeat of war grows louder. New troop movements. A Russian aircraft intercepted. Another day, another headline. But behind every headline, a family hides in a basement. A soldier writes his last letter. A child learns to recognize the sound of sirens before the sound of laughter. This war has become a frozen wound. Neither side willing to step back, neither side ready to admit exhaustion. For Ukraine, it is survival. For Russia, it is defiance. For the rest of the world, it is a test of unity, a test of resolve, and a test of how long compassion can outlast fatigue. Remember this, geopolitics is fought in conference rooms, but its price is paid in blood. The war may look like maps, arrows, statistics. But the reality is graves, rubble, silence. And every day it drags on, the harder it becomes to imagine its end.
Well, those are the speculations which are being spread by, first of all, Mr. Zelensky himself and his European sponsors. It was not discussed in Anchorage. It was raised later as something which is kind of impromptu, appearing from the meeting in Washington between President Trump and his guests. President Putin received the call of President Trump after that meeting, and he clearly stated that we are ready to continue the negotiations, direct Russian-Ukrainian negotiations, which started in Istanbul and already had 3 rounds convened there. And he said that meetings at the top level, the summit meetings, especially between the leaders of Russia and Ukraine, must be very well prepared, so preparatory process must be agreed. And for this, we suggested to raise the level of delegations who were meeting and will be meeting in Istanbul to address specific issues which need to be brought to the attention of the President Putin and Zelensky. And those issues relate both to humanitarian, military, and to political matters. Last time our delegations met in Istanbul, we suggested to create 3 working groups, including on political matters. More than 1 month passed already, there is no response from the Ukrainian side. And when Mr. Zelensky says the immediate priority is my meeting with Putin, well, it's basically a game. A game he is very good to play. Because he wants theatrics in everything he is doing. He does not care about substance. And it is not by chance that now they try, I mean the Ukrainians and the Europeans who attended the meeting in Washington, they try to distort what was discussed in Anchorage between President Trump and President Putin regarding, in particular, the security guarantees. I read some Bloomberg reports yesterday and today saying that the negotiations between US and Russia on security guarantees for Ukraine have been in fact undermined because of the demands by Moscow to include the principle of indivisible security. It's a very telling statement. Indivisible security is something which was enshrined in many documents adopted by consensus at the summits of Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, in particular, in Istanbul in 1999 and in Astana in 2010. This principle goes like no one can strengthen his security at the expense of security of others. No organization in the European space can pretend to dominate in military and political matters, and NATO has been doing exactly the opposite. So when we are accused that by flagging the principle of indivisible security, we are undermining the process of negotiations between US, Russia, and Ukraine, this means that the people admit that they want divisible security, that they want security built for Ukraine, which is being discussed now, but built against Russia. Those discussions which took place yesterday, before yesterday, after the Washington meeting, they clearly indicate that people see security as only security for Ukraine, and they are prepared to send intervention force, occupying force, to the Ukrainian territory to deter Russia. They don't conceal that this is the goal. And this is not the way to handle the situation. President Putin and President Trump in Anchorage discussed the security guarantees, and President Putin recalled that in April 2022 in Istanbul, during negotiations initiated by the Ukrainian side, very soon after we started our special military operation, during those negotiations in April in 2022, Ukrainian delegation presented a draft principles to reach a treaty, to reach agreement on ending the war. Those principles were initialed by both delegations, and as regards the security guarantees for Ukraine, those principles proposed by Ukrainian delegation, I underline this once again, they provided for creation a group of guarantors. This group containing of permanent members of the Security Council, Russia, US, China, UK, and France. Plus, they mentioned Germany, Turkey, and any other country which would be interested to join this group of guarantors. And guarantors would be guaranteeing the security of Ukraine, which must be neutral, which must be non-aligned with any military bloc, and which must be non-nuclear. Look, I hope that those who are interested in what is going on around Ukraine, they follow the statements of President Putin, especially when they try to see some wrongdoing on our side. President Putin repeatedly stated that he is ready to meet with President Zelensky. And actually yesterday at my press conference after my meeting with the Minister of India, I repeated this, that he is ready to meet with President Zelensky, provided this meeting is really going to decide something. To meet for Zelensky to have another opportunity to be on stage is not what we believe is useful. We are not against him playing games and playing various shows, but it is not going to resolve the issue, because he publicly stated that he is not going to discuss any territories, thus challenging President Trump and other American colleagues who stated the territorial issue must be on the table. He clearly stated that nobody can prohibit him from joining NATO, which is again categorically challenges what President Trump was saying, and quite a number of other things. He also said that he is not going to restore the rights of the Russian-speaking people and cancel legislation which was passed long before the special military operation, starting from 2019. A series of legislation was passed in Ukrainian parliament prohibiting Russian language, exterminating Russian language, Russian culture, Russian education, Russian media, and canonic Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So when he said that I don't give a damn about what you are saying, what President Trump believes must be a part of the solution, but I am ready to meet just to do what? So if we are all going to be concentrated on imaginary effect, it's not what diplomacy is about. It's what the showmen normally do with pleasure. Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky when the agenda would be ready for a summit. And this agenda is not ready at all. President Trump suggested, after Anchorage, several points which we share. And on some of them, we agreed to show some flexibility. When President Trump brought those issues to the meeting in Washington, with Zelensky present together with his European sponsors, he clearly indicated, it was very clear to everybody that there are several principles which Washington believes must be accepted, including no NATO membership, including the discussion of territorial issues, and Zelensky said no to everything. He even said no to, as I said, to canceling legislation prohibiting the Russian language. How can we meet with a person who is pretending to be a leader, the leader of a country?
So the war in Ukraine is a war that the U.S. caused. Not a war that Putin caused, but a war that the U.S. caused by expanding the military alliance, NATO, eastward, and trying to set up a military base or bases in Ukraine and in the South Caucasus, especially the country Georgia. And the Russian government said, no, you can't have military bases on our border. We don't accept that. That's a real security threat for us. And the American position was, it's none of your business, Russia, what we do. If Ukraine says yes, we're going to put our missiles next to you. And President Putin said, no, you're not. That's dangerous for us. And the United States said, it's none of your business. And so this is the essence of the Ukraine conflict, which is that the U.S. said we can expand our military reach anywhere. The Russians said not on our border.
From the battlefield to the living room. In the United States, millions may lose Fox channels on YouTube TV right as football season begins. Now, let's be clear. This is not war. It is not life or death. But it does remind us of something important. The promises of streaming, freedom, choice, flexibility, are colliding with the reality of money, contracts, and power. Think of a family gathering for Sunday football. Suddenly, the screen goes dark. Not because of a storm, but because billion-dollar companies can't agree on who gets paid more. It feels small compared to war or energy bills, and yet it is part of the same story. Power. Control. Ordinary people caught in the middle of giants fighting for profit. If streaming was supposed to set us free, maybe this blackout is proof that freedom always comes at a price.
There is a very serious contract negotiation standoff going on right now with YouTube TV and Fox Corporation, okay? That means anything Fox related. Fox Sports, Fox Business, Fox News. So this means people who are really big into sports, who watch their sports and stream it on YouTube TV, highlights, anything related, they might have blackout channels, just like all the other channels now. Now YouTube TV might be affected. You know, I'm a sports girl, and there's a lot of sports I watch on YouTube, and I depend and rely on that. So right now, there are negotiations, okay? And this deadline has to be met by August 27th, which is tomorrow, Wednesday. So they are in a tight situation tonight trying to, okay, I'm gonna just read it like this, just like I received it, okay? Millions of YouTube subscribers are bracing themselves for the potential channel subscribers and the blackout channels, okay, from YouTube TV and Fox Corporation, meaning they are in a tight standoff right now because they need to renew a contract by August 27th, Wednesday, which is tomorrow. And the way we can be affected, us the viewers, is that we can lose a lot of our favorite shows and programs that we always look forward to watching on YouTube TV. They're basically saying if Google does not negotiate in good faith, Fox will be snatching these channels from us, okay? And that's not good. This is seriously a back and forth war that they're having. Google claims that Fox is demanding way higher payments than any other partners, okay? This is what Google YouTube TV is claiming, okay? And on the other end, Fox is also basically bitching about, they're accusing Google YouTube of using their massive leverage of their market power to push out terms that are not in compliance, okay? So meaning YouTube has such a wide mainstream of people, subscribers and viewers, that they are not, they're leveraging, okay? So basically that's what Fox News is. So I'm gonna read here again. The implications of the blackouts are significant, okay? Nearly 10 million of YouTube subscribers could lose access to not only the popular news and business shows, but also the marquee sports broadcast, including much anticipated games that are approaching, okay? NFL coverage with the opening games that are slated for early September. Okay, that's right around the corner. That's next week. So this is like, they're pushing it, basically. This is the deadline. Someone has to give, and they need to get it together because we've been waiting for our sports, and now we don't want this to happen. Now we're going to have blackout channels. Now we're going to have to jump around from app to app, to channel to channel to watch certain. That's a whole nother topic. Okay, let me just gather myself. But anyway, this is very serious, so we need to brace ourselves for these blackout channels if it happens, or basically we're going to start paying more for YouTube TV. Bottom line.
8 million people might be barred from watching college football this weekend. That's because YouTube TV and Fox are involved in a major carriage dispute that could result in none of the Fox Sports channels being available to YouTube TV subscribers. Fox, FS1, Big Ten Network, that's a pretty huge deal because the marquee matchup, Texas-Ohio State, is going to be on Fox. If YouTube TV and Fox don't reach an agreement by the end of the day Wednesday, there may not be college football week 1 on YouTube TV this weekend. And if there's a more longer term dispute where for an extended period of time the two can't reach an agreement, YouTube TV will give out a $10 credit. I personally don't have a problem with this carriage dispute because I am a Roku TV user. But if you're a YouTube TV subscriber and you're struggling to figure out what your plans are this weekend, leave a comment and let's see if we can come up with some ideas.
So tonight, we saw 4 battles. A battle of tariffs. A battle for warmth. A battle of sovereignty. And yes, even a battle for television screens. Different in scale. Different in consequence. But all pointing to one truth: the lines of power are shifting. And every shift, every clash, every choice made above us ripples down to touch the lives of people like you and me. My role is not to give you hope or despair. My role is to give you clarity. And with clarity, you can choose how to see the world. Thank you for staying with me. Until tomorrow, stay safe, stay curious, and stay human.